Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Yesterday, Mr. Modi addressed the police conference in Guwahati about the need for critical police reforms. But were the issues that Mr. Modi raised the key ones that need to be tackled? Or did he get sidetracked by peripheral, if beguiling issues? That's the discussion in part 2. But first, Mr. Modi's energetic and successful handling of foreign affairs has raised two important concerns. What role is left for Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj? And is the PMO, along with the NSA, taking over greater and greater control of foreign policy at the cost of the MEA, the Foreign Minister and Foreign Secretary? On Sunday, a headline in the Times of India asked, "Is Swaraj a dummy?" Whilst that may be a blunt and even unfair question, does it point towards an issue of concern that needs to be addressed? That's the first discussion tonight. And now joining me to discuss who in India is driving foreign policy and what role is left for the Foreign Minister is former Foreign Minister Salman Khurshid, two former Foreign Secretaries Kamal Sibal and Lalit Mansingh, one of India's most respected senior ambassadors and foreign affairs thinkers K.S. Bajpai, and a member of the BJP National Executive and himself a foreign affairs analyst, Seshadri Chari. Salman Khurshid, yesterday the Times of India published an article with the following headline: with the Prime Minister charting the foreign course, is Swaraj a dummy? And to be honest, many others are now asking that question as well. As her predecessor and a member of the opposition, what's your answer to that question?
Well, that's not a question that I should be answering. It's a question that the BJP should answer. Sushma Swaraj is a very experienced leader. She was leader of the opposition in the House in Lok Sabha, and I do know that she has good experience of foreign affairs. So if the party and the government is not making use of her expertise, her knowledge, her experience and her vision, then I can only say that it's a very sad thing.
Mr. Chari, the Times of India points out that even for critical multilateral meetings like the BRICS in Brazil, ASEAN in Myanmar, G20 in Australia, or the meeting with Pacific Island nations in Fiji, Sushma Swaraj was conspicuous by her absence. How do you respond to the paper?
No, I don't agree with this comment by this paper at all. In fact, I agree with what Salman said in his first part of his thing. I think the party is making use of the foreign minister as the party is making use of any other minister, number one. More importantly, the prime minister, the foreign policy of the country is set by the prime minister. It is because of the morbidity of these last 10 years that we feel that foreign policy is the exclusive reserve of some other person. No, the Prime Minister has to hard-sell the country, the Prime Minister has to lead the country in foreign affairs by himself taking all the things, and he does it all in consultation with the MEA, with the huge apparatus of MEA.
So she is fully in the loop, you're saying?
Absolutely.
Kamal Sibal, you've told me that a few foreign ambassadors have asked you whether in the Modi regime, the foreign minister is the key decision-making center, or whether, rather than the ministry, that key decision-making center is the PMO and the NSA, and whether they should develop contacts in those areas. Doesn't that suggest that even critical people like foreign ministers are not sure where, in fact, decision-making is happening? Because ambassadors wouldn't ask that question otherwise, would they?
No, I would nuance it in the sense that given the fact that Prime Minister Modi is very energetic, he's giving leadership, he's very active, and he's taking control very visibly of our relationship with major powers, which is why there are questions in the minds of diplomats, ambassadors here as to how much role does the foreign minister herself and the MEA have, or is it that the role is being taken over increasingly by the PMO? They know from experience and from their own countries that actually the most important person in the foreign policy domain is the head of the government or the head of the state. So it's not as if they are not aware, but they also know that Sushma Swaraj is very feisty, she's very articulate, she's been leader of the opposition, as was just said, she has a lot of political experience, and then of course there is the perception her personal relationship with Modi has not been very close, so therefore they ask themselves the question, how much does she contribute in terms of Modi's thinking? I think that is where the question lies. But at the end of the day, the foreign ambassadors have to deal with the Ministry of External Affairs and the Minister of External Affairs, because their access to the PMO will always be limited, especially to the Prime Minister.
That is the gateway they have. But I want to pick up on something that Kamal Sibal said, then put it to you, Ambassador Bajpai. It's no secret that there are political differences and tensions between Prime Minister Modi and Sushma Swaraj. In fact, it was widely speculated he didn't actually want her as foreign minister until he found he had no alternative. Now, today, it's widely rumored that the Prime Minister has reservations or differences even with the Foreign Secretary. Is all of that another factor that works to minimize their influence and therefore minimize the influence of the Foreign Ministry?
Well, the gossip of the day has it that way. I don't really know enough to be able to confirm or deny it. But in any case, the point that Kanwal just made is the vital one. It is happening everywhere in the world that the head of government takes charge of foreign policy. The range and rapidity of Mr. Modi's involvement, as you yourself have paid tribute, is quite remarkable. But the fact remains that this is a common trend all over the world.
Except that what adds an element here which may not exist elsewhere in the world is the known differences between the PM and the Foreign Minister, and now the speculation about the differences allegedly between the PM and the Foreign Secretary. And these are things that diplomats and analysts pick up. Does that add to the story the Times of India published, provide a certain basis for it?
I think you're giving too much importance to the Times of India, frankly. I think the differences between ministers is also common. We've had prime ministers in Britain who have had fighting relationships with their other ministers, notably foreign ministers. I mean, sometimes one wonders who is the foreign minister of England.
And on those occasions, the foreign minister of Britain, the foreign secretary, as he's called, was minimized. Are you suggesting something could happen similar here?
It could be. I don't know the inner politics.
Let me quote Mr. Mansingh from today's Times of India. It says, power corridors have been abuzz with discussions over the limited influence Swaraj wields in her ministry, and many allege the most important decisions on the foreign affairs front are taken by the Prime Minister in consultation with National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. Is the relationship between Mr. Modi and his Foreign Minister markedly different to the relationship between earlier Prime Ministers and their Foreign Ministers? Because that, in a sense, is what the Times of India is clearly suggesting.
I think what the Times of India said is wrong. Every Prime Minister from the beginning, from Pandit Nehru onwards, has been the de facto foreign minister. Now here we are talking about a group of people who are handling foreign affairs, and there are 5 important players. The Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister, the National Security Advisor, the Principal Secretary of the Prime Minister, and the Foreign Secretary. 5 people. They have chemistry problems. I'm pretty sure that's a natural situation, but the team works. And there is no question, as Mr. Chari said, the Prime Minister is in charge of foreign affairs. He is responsible for foreign affairs.
That I don't deny.
Yes.
That he's in charge and he has a very firm hand on the tiller.
Right.
But has he minimized, perhaps unintentionally, but has he minimized his Foreign Minister to the point where not just newspapers, but a lot of other people are speculating what's her role?
There's a division of work that is the responsibility of the Prime Minister. But let me make it clear. The Ministry of External Affairs has an assigned role within the government. It is there in the cabinet rules.
And that can't be undermined.
All
right. Let's then broaden the discussion. Salman Khursheed, to what extent has the institution of the National Security Advisor, which operates out of the PMO and which has its own secretariat, over the years eaten into the role and authority of the Foreign Ministry, and therefore also into the role and authority of the Foreign Minister?
Well, I didn't have any problem, frankly, if I go back to my own experience. I think it's a lot to do with the personal chemistry between different people. It's too late now in the world to say that you shouldn't have an NSA because the world is, in strategic terms, becoming extremely complex. But I think it's important for a political dominance in a government to ensure that the political element, which means the foreign minister supported by the MEA, remains significant in inputs. Of course, there are strategic inputs that will come from the NSA, but it really is the responsibility of the Prime Minister to ensure that you keep the right balance.
Absolutely, and if the Prime Minister doesn't get on with his foreign minister, then that right balance won't be maintained, and that may be one of the problems here, because there is an NSA who he relies on and perhaps has a close affinity to. Isn't that the corollary to what you're saying, Salman Khurshid?
Well, I don't know. I don't know their personal predilections or their personal relationships. But I can only see the product, and I can assure you that we in the Congress are not very happy about the product, despite the event management that's obviously sounds very successful for the President. But I think there's a lot of substance that still needs to be worked on.
Mr. Jari, let me pursue it like this. We know that Mr. Modi and Mr. Doval have a very clear idea of how they want to chart India's foreign policy. And that surely means that they will be the engine of the thinking that drives India's foreign policy. Ipso facto, therefore, the foreign ministry, the foreign minister, the foreign secretary become people who implement, who handle the procedural follow-through. Doesn't that mean they have a secondary role?
No, it's not so. There have been two occasions where the foreign ministers have overshadowed the Prime Minister. One was during Morarji Desai government, when Morarji Desai himself assigned this role of leading India by example, or leading it outside the world, outside India, through Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was the foreign minister. The second was probably when Deve Gowda was the Prime Minister and I.K. Gujral was the foreign minister. It was, remember that, it was not the Prime Minister Deve Gowda, but it was the foreign minister who propagated his foreign policy, which came to be known as Gujral policy.
There were
Gujral
no NSAs
doctrine.
during that period.
And there were
was
NSAs.
therefore no institution
So the
of the
first
PMO to rival the MEA.
Correct.
That you have now. That's why I asked you.
The first time we got an NSA was Brijesh Mishra, who was himself an expert on foreign policy affairs, and there was a good chemistry. Similarly, I think now, by extension, there is an excellent chemistry between all the five people that Ambassador Mansingh very rightly pointed out. So if you look at, as someone who has
There's excellent chemistry between the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary as well?
Also, I don't go by the stories that we have been putting out, not you exactly, but some, these are stories which are circulating. It's all, it need not be taken
at face
value.
Kamal Sibal, let's take the invitation to President Obama to be chief guest at Republic Day. Many people see it as a game-changing move. And it's widely believed that the idea originated with the Prime Minister, and Mrs. Swaraj may not have been fully involved in the loop. Now, if that is the case, would that be understandable, or would it be an issue of concern to you as a former Foreign Secretary?
Well, I won't know what really happened, whether Sushma Swaraj was in the loop or not in the loop, but it's quite clear that this idea emanated from Prime Minister Modi himself, because it's a very unusual move. No one would have ordinarily thought of inviting the US President to our Republic Day celebrations. And the relationship hasn't got built up to the point, even during Mr. Modi's tenure, that would automatically justify such an invitation. But clearly in his mind, he wants to establish very close ties with the United States, and this is one way of showing to America and to the US President that he has personally no rancor against the United States for visa denial. But on top of it, he feels that India's interest will be much better met.
But the question I'm asking you is not why he invited Obama. The question I'm asking you is, if Sushma was out of that loop, would it worry you?
No, why this impression has come about is because the first announcement that was made of Obama's visit was from the Prime Minister himself, who tweeted this. Now, this is extremely unusual and very unorthodox way of announcing such an important visit. And this reinforced the impression that this was Prime Minister's personal decision. He wanted it to be known that it was his personal decision, and therefore by deduction it would appear that he didn't have others in the loop, which might which might well be the case, but I'm sure at some stage he would have informed the foreign minister, because it would have been very odd if the foreign minister was not at all in the loop. But it's possible that the foreign secretary and others were not in the loop.
All right, that's a very clear and forthright answer. Now, in contrast, Mr. Bajpai, both Condoleezza Rice's book and Natwar Singh's book makes it clear that as foreign minister, Natwar Singh played a critical role in the understanding and the arrangements that led up to the Indo-US nuclear deal. In fact, there was a point when Dr. Manmohan Singh himself was prepared to give up and say this wasn't going to happen and accept that it wasn't going to happen, when Condoleezza Rice contacted Natwar and arranged for Natwar to meet Manmohan Singh and get Manmohan Singh to change his mind. Clearly, Natwar played a critical role at that point. We don't have any information that suggests that Mrs. Swaraj has played a similar critical role in the improving relations between India and America at the moment.
Well, I think we should also give credit to Mr. Manmohan Singh's initiatives on the foreign policy side.
But this is not about that. This is about a comparison between the critical role Natwar played as foreign minister and the absence of a critical role that Sushma is playing, from all we know.
The important point to remember is that the Prime Minister even then was the main player, and I think he remains the main player and will continue to perhaps even more of a main player under the new regime. But as far as the critical role part is concerned, we don't know. The fact that he tweeted on his own, internet, to me is, protocol and procedure are important, but to be quite honest, to try something new is fine with me.
Do you believe that just as Natwar changed Manmohan Singh's mind when Manmohan Singh had given up on the deal, Sushma Swaraj could have influenced Mr. Modi to change his mind?
Well, I don't know that the question arose. I'm not sure about the earlier story either. But as far as this is concerned, why should there have been a conflict?
All right. Let me put it like this, Mr. Man Singh. There is no doubt that in the last 6 months, Mr. Modi has given a lot of time to foreign policy. But as Prime Minister, he has many other, perhaps more pressing commitments to attend to: the economy, health, education, digital India, Swachh Bharat. Now, if the engine of foreign policy thinking is the PMO, what happens when the Prime Minister diverts his attention to other subjects? Thinking may stop or slow down.
No, we're talking about system here. The Prime Minister, when he is abroad, doesn't cease to be Prime Minister, doesn't cease to take decisions on domestic policy. There's a system of collective responsibility. And that's the main thing. Whether the Prime Minister announces something or somebody else, it is a collective responsibility of the government. So I don't think...
Except that who makes the announcement looks very much as if it's the person who's taking responsibility for it and played the key role. Now, as Kamal Sibal pointed out, it's extremely unusual for the Prime Minister to tweet something like this, which suggests he's taking personal ownership, and therefore he's clearly making
but why is it unusual?
This was his
if we
and not hers.
If we accept that the Prime Minister is the de facto foreign minister, why is it unusual that he's made a statement?
But should Prime Ministers be the de facto foreign minister? That's the point, because he actually has a de jure foreign minister.
No, that's the point I'm making, that every Prime Minister from Pandit Nehru onwards has been the de facto Prime Minister. You take foreign minister, you take Mrs. Gandhi, you take Rajiv Gandhi, you take Narasimha Rao, everybody has had the final say.
To the extent that question marks are being asked about Sushma Swaraj's role in public, in print, that's never happened previously before.
No, but remember, at the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting, when Mr. Krishna was asked about the agreement, he said, I didn't know about this. It is not an unusual situation. Also remember that we are judging an external affairs minister on the basis of just 6 months of the working of a government.
I mean, it's too early to come to conclusion.
I think it is too early.
I'll come to the moment. Let me just bring it, Saman, and I'll come back. Saman Khushi, I want to widen the discussion one step further. There's no doubt that in India, historically, Prime Ministers have played a decisive role in formulating foreign policy. In fact, Nehru and Gujral were their own foreign ministers. They didn't have a foreign minister. Would Mr. Modi, given his determination and his clear thinking on how he wants to chart foreign policy, have been wiser not to have a full-fledged foreign minister and to work with the Minister of State as Mr. Vajpayee did right up till Jaswant Singh was appointed? Would that have been wiser rather than have a foreign minister and then have the press calling her a dummy?
Well, I think it's unfair to the foreign minister, frankly, to in absentia decide everything about her. I mean, I'm sure that you could have her on your channel one day and you could discuss these things with her. But my instinct is that the Prime Minister, no matter who it is, no, maybe she will change her mind. But no matter who the Prime Minister is, but I think the world is too complex a place for the Prime Minister to take everything onto themselves and not have a foreign minister. I think the Prime Minister should have the confidence to get a person of their confidence and someone who has the ability to carry the foreign policy, even if they believe that they must be the dominant force in the foreign policy, which is fine, but they must then take the right person to carry that forward. And I think that by depriving the MEA of a good person to deal with as a leader would be extremely unfortunate for the country, and I do hope that the present Prime Minister will not do that.
You know, the key issue was that the Prime Minister must have a person as Foreign Minister he has confidence in. Does the Prime Minister have that confidence in Mrs. Swaraj? Because you know and I know, he wasn't keen to give her one of the top four. It was made pretty clear that she wouldn't join the cabinet unless she had one of the top four. In the end, it was given. Those stories circulated so widely in the media and within your party that you know and I know they were true. So today, when in a sense his hand was forced, does she have his confidence? Because that's the problem.
You may know all these things, but I don't know, because I don't attach any importance to all these stories. And Karan, I have also been a journalist for a long time, at least 12 years. So I know how stories are planted, so I don't believe any of these stories.
Planted by your party?
No, not at all. I deny that. Anyway, as far as the chemistry between the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister is concerned, I know for sure that it is excellent. And as far as tweeting is concerned, the Prime Minister tweets about black money, the Prime Minister tweets about connectivity, he tweets about Swachh Bharat. That does not mean he doesn't take all these ministers into confidence.
Let me put a second question to
you. So I mean, we are unfortunately, we are in a situation where we are comparing this Prime Minister with earlier Prime Ministers who are probably not as proactive as he is, who are not as tech-savvy as others.
Jawaharlal Nehru was his own foreign minister. I'm suggesting that maybe Mr. Modi would have been better off as his own foreign minister.
But in his own wisdom, he has chosen one of the best persons to be the foreign minister of the country.
Let me put something else to you. The amazing thing is today, people are comparing Sushma Swaraj to S.M. Krishna, who most people would accept was a dummy. They are not, let me finish, they are not comparing Sushma Swaraj to Pranab Mukherjee, who by no means was a dummy. To what extent is the adverse comments about Sushma Swaraj a reflection not of Mr. Modi keeping her at arm's length, but of the fact that Mrs. Swaraj may not be herself as assertive as a foreign minister needs to be, and that within the system she may be far too willingly accepting a secondary role?
No, the question is not whether one is assertive, the question is not whether one is marketing oneself in that manner. The question is how best they are all functioning as a team, and I see there is excellent teamwork in this connection, and I have been meeting all these people. I have also been meeting a number of diplomats who have been regularly meeting the foreign ministers.
So you haven't met diplomats like Kanwal Sibal has, who wonder where decisions are happening, because he's met them, he's talked about it.
I am not a patch on Kanwal Sibal as far as the foreign policy issues are concerned. His contacts are very wide. But as far as my meetings with some of the delegates of some of the diplomats are concerned, they have all been meeting the foreign minister, and they have been taking lead from the foreign minister. They have been also providing information, and they have also been talking about their country's affairs with the foreign minister.
Kanwal Sibal, let me pursue it like this. You've argued and others have argued that the Prime Minister's dominance in foreign policy is a given. But that's also true of the Prime Minister's dominance in economic policy. And this Prime Minister in particular is very committed to delivering on the economic front. Make in India, by the way, is something he's closely associated with. He launched it. But no one turns around and says that Arun Jaitley as finance minister is a dummy. Yet the Times of India has said that about Mrs. Swaraj. How do you explain that? Because the PM's dominance in both fields is equal and his interest is equal.
Well, I think so far as the finance minister is concerned, you are right that he has an impressive persona of his own, and he's an insider, Delhi insider. and he's certainly playing a prominent role himself, and he's got a huge job on his hands. And Prime Minister, of course, is giving the overall lead. In the case of the Foreign Minister, what really has happened is that Prime Minister Modi had established certain personal equations when he was Gujarat Chief Minister, whether with China or with Japan, etc., etc. And some of the first things he did was to build upon these personal equations. Not with Obama. No, he built these personal equations.
Not only
and he made very rapid moves towards these countries, etc., etc. And then, of course, because of the visa denial, and he wanted really to bury the issue once and for all, and in a sense make the Americans eat crow, and even President Obama eat crow, by not only welcoming him to the White House, but accepting with such alacrity his invitation to visit
So
New
what
Delhi.
you're saying is when the menu is crow, there's no need to make Mrs. Swaraj partake of it.
No, in the sense that the circumstances were such that suddenly there has been a huge focus on foreign policy with G20 meetings, East Asia Summit, some of these big visits that have taken place, that the Foreign Minister has gone a bit into the background. But I would maintain that there is no way that the Foreign Ministry can be run by the PMO or by the National Security Advisor. There is a huge machinery. There are so many countries, 190 countries in the world. The PMO, NSA and others would take interest in the key countries, but there is a huge world out there beyond these countries. And even in the case of the important countries, the Foreign Ministry has to do all the spade work, do all the paperwork, you know, and there is a huge repository of information that they have to delve into, prepare
the grudge and the grind is left to the Foreign Minister and the Foreign Ministry. No one will take it away. But the catchy stuff, the stuff that makes the real thinking and the change and the reform is very much the PM's prerogative, which is why you said the Foreign Minister has receded into the background. I've given you a lot of time. You have to wait. No, you can't forget everything.
Why should you think that only China and US are important countries?
I need to bring the others in. They have to have a fair chance, Mr. Chari. In the last 6 months, Mr. Bajpai, all the top secretaries in the Finance Ministry have been changed. It is very much a refurbished ministry, so to speak. Do you expect something similar in the Foreign Ministry, which would place in critical positions men and women that Mr. Modi has personal faith and trust in?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that there are other secretaries also in external affairs, so that let's not just focus on one. But the fact remains, secretaries come and go according to the seniority rule, but also sometimes according to the convenience of the service and no doubt the preferences of the political masters.
Do you expect a refurbishment of the Foreign Ministry like you've seen of the Finance Ministry?
I have absolutely no means of judging. It may well be, that's the rumor of the day.
It is the rumor of the day.
I have heard that, but I don't know, and I have no basis on which to comment. But I would simply endorse what has just been said, that the world has now changed so much. There are protocol and policy both require high-level representation at conferences.
Absolutely. That doesn't contradict what I'm saying.
So no, but that needs a minister. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, absolutely. It needs a minister for the grudge and the grind, but for the important cutting-edge reform, the initiative has moved to other hands.
Everywhere in the world.
Does this situation